Okay, A Christmas Carol for Voices, Part 2. Awaking in the middle of a tremendous snore, Scrooge became aware that the bell was again upon the stroke of one, and that he had become conscious in the right nick of time. Being prepared for almost anything, he was not prepared for nothing. And consequently, when the bell struck one and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. All this time, he lay upon his bed, the very core and centre of a blaze of ruddy light, which being only light was more alarming than a dozen ghosts. At last, he began to think that the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence it seemed to shine. He got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him by his name and bade him enter. He obeyed. It was his own room. There's no doubt about that, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove, from every part of which bright, gleaming berries glistened. Upon a couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch and held it up high up to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door.
Come in and know me better, man. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. You have never seen the like of me before.
Never.
Have never walked forth with the younger members of my family, meaning, for I am very young, my elder brothers born in these later years.
I don't think I have. I am afraid I have not. Have you had many brothers, Spirit?
More than 1,800.
A tremendous family to provide for. Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learnt a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe.
All around the spirit vanished instantly. So did the room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of night, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning, where the weather was severe. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked up with a dingy mist, half thawed, half frozen, whose heavier particles descended in a shower of sooty atoms, as if all the chimneys in Great Britain had by one consent caught fire, and were blazing away to their dear hearts' content. Yet there was an air of cheerfulness abroad that the clearest summer air and brightest summer sun might have endeavoured to diffuse in vain. The poulterers' shops were still half open, and the fruiterers radiant in their glory. And at the same time, there emerged from scores of streets innumerable people, carrying their dinners to the bakers' shops. The sight of these poor revellers appeared to interest the spirit very much, for he stood with Scrooge beside him in a baker's doorway and sprinkled incense on their dinners from his torch. In time, the church bells ceased and the bakers were shut up. And yet there was a genial shadowing forth of all these dinners and the progress of their cooking, and the pavement smoked as if its stones were cooking too.
Is there a peculiar flavour in what you sprinkle from your torch?
There is, my own.
Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day?
To any kindly given. To a poor one most.
Why a poor one most?
Because it needs it most.
Spirit, I wonder you, of all the beings in the many worlds about us, should desire to cramp these people's opportunities of innocent enjoyment?
I?
You seek to close these places on the seventh day, and it comes to the same thing.
I seek?
Forgive me if I'm wrong. It has been done in your name, or at least in that of your family.
There are some upon this earth of yours who lay claim to know us, and who do their deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, and selfishness in our name, who are as strange to us and all our kith and kin as if they had never lived. Remember that, and charge their doings on themselves, not us.
Scrooge promised that he would, and they went on, invisible, into the suburbs of the town. And perhaps it was the pleasure the good spirit had in showing off this power of his, or else it was his own kind, generous nature and his sympathy with all poor men, that led him straight to Scrooge's clerk's. And he stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinkling of his torch. Then up rose Mrs. Cratchit, dressed but poorly in a twice-turned gown, and she laid the tablecloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes and into his mouth. And now two smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they smelt the goose and known it for their own. These young Cratchits danced about the table, calling on Master Peter to blow upon the fire until the cold potatoes, bubbling up, knocked loudly on the saucepan lid.
Oh, young Cratchit, me boy, what has ever got your precious father then, and your mother, Tiny Tim, and Martha, weren't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour?
Here's Martha, Mummy. Here's Martha. Hurry. There's such a goose, Martha.
Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are. Martha? Martha?
You're still on, Paul. We'll deal
Sorry.
with it.
Sorry, I thought Martha came in. We have to deal with her. Well, never mind. So long as you are come, sit ye down before the fire, my dear, and have a warm-up. God bless you.
No. There's Father coming. Hide, Martha, hide.
So Martha hid herself, and in came little Bob the father, with at least 3 feet of scarf, exclusive of the fringe, hanging down before him, and his threadbare clothes darned up and brushed to look seasonable, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch, and had his limbs supported by an iron frame.
Why, where's our Martha?
Not coming.
Not coming? Not coming upon Christmas Day?
Martha didn't like to see him disappointed, even if it were only in joke. So she came out prematurely from behind the closet door and ran into his arms, while the 2 young Cratchits hustled Tiny Tim and bore him off to the wash-house, that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper.
And how did little Tiny Tim behave?
As good as gold and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped the people saw him in the church, because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
Bob's voice was tremulous when he told him this, and he trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. His active little crutch was heard upon the floor and back from Tiny Tim before another word was spoken, escorted by his brother and sister to his stool before the fire. And while Bob compounded some hot mixture in a jug with gin and lemons, and stirred it round and round and put it on the hob to simmer, Master Peter and the two ubiquitous young Cratchits went to fetch the goose, which they soon returned in high procession. There never was such a goose. Bob said he didn't believe there ever was such a goose cooked. Eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes, it was a sufficient dinner for the whole family. Everyone had had enough. And the youngest Cratchits in particular were steeped in sage and onion to the eyebrows. But now Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone to take the pudding up and bring it in. In half a minute, Mrs. Cratchit entered, flushed but smiling proudly, with the pudding, like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing in half a quartern of ignited brandy and bedight with Christmas holly stuck into the top. At last the dinner was all done, and the family display of glass, 2 tumblers, and a custard cup without a handle were filled with the hot stuff from the jug, and Bob served it out with beaming looks. Then Bob proposed.
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us.
And God bless us, everyone! Tiptoe through the tulip.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
No, no. Oh no, kind spirit. Say he will be spared.
If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population.
Hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the spirit, and was overcome with penitence and grief.
Man, if man you be in heart, not adamant, forbear that wicked cant until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live, what men shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. Oh God, to hear the insect on the leaf pronouncing on the too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust.
Mr. Scrooge, I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
Oh, the founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it.
My dear, the children, Christmas Day.
Should be Christmas Day, I'm sure, in which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you, oh poor fellow.
My dear, Christmas Day.
Well, I'll drink his health for your sake, and it is, not for his. Long life to him. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt.
The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings which had no heartiness. Tiny Tim drank it last of all, but he didn't care twopence for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party. By this time, it was getting dark and snowing pretty heavily as Scrooge and the spirit went along the streets. And now, without a word of warning from the ghost, they stood upon a bleak and desert moor, where monstrous masses of rude stone were cast about as though it were the burial place of giants, and nothing grew but moss and furze and coarse, rank grass. Down in the west, the setting sun had left a streak of fiery red, which glared upon the desolation, and then was lost in the thick gloom of darkest night.
What place is this?
a place where miners live who labour in the bowels of the earth. But they know me.
Again, the ghost sped on above the black and heaving sea, on, until being far away, as he told Scrooge, from any shore, they lighted on a ship. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while listening to the moaning of the wind and thinking what a solemn thing it was to move on through the lonely darkness over an unknown abyss whose depths were secrets as profound as death. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while thus engaged, to hear a hearty laugh. It was a much greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to find himself in bright, dry, gleaming room with the spirit standing smiling by his side.
He said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live. He believed it too.
More shame for him, Fred.
He's a comical old fellow, that's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offences carry their own judgment, own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him.
I'm sure he's very rich, Fred. At least you always tell me so.
What of that, my dear? His wealth is of no use to him. He don't do any good with it. He don't make himself comfortable with it. He hasn't the satisfaction of thinking that he's ever going to benefit us from it.
I have no patience with him.
Oh, I have. I am sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. Here he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. And what's the consequence? We don't lose much of a dinner.
Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner. Everybody else said the same, and they must be allowed to have been competent judges, because they had just had dinner, and with the dessert upon the table, were clustered round the fire by lamplight.
Well, I'm very glad to hear it, because I haven't great faith in these young housekeepers. What do you say, Topper?
Do go on, Fred. He never finishes what he begins to say. He is such a ridiculous fellow.
I was only going to say that the consequence of his having a dislike to us and not making merry with us is, as I think, that he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. I am sure he loses pleasanter companions than he can find in his own thoughts, either in his mouldy old office or his dusty chambers. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not. For I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. I defy him. If he finds me going there in good temper year after year and saying, "Uncle Scrooge, how are you?" If it only puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk £50, that's something. And I think I shook him yesterday.
It was their turn to laugh now at the notion of his shaking Scrooge. But being thoroughly good-natured and not much caring what they laughed at, so that they laughed at any rate, he encouraged them in their merriment and passed the bottle joyously. After tea, they had some music, for they were a musical family and knew what they were about. But they didn't devote the whole evening to music. After a while, they played at forfeits. There might have been 20 people there, young and old, but all played. And so did Scrooge. For wholly forgetting, in the interest he had in what was going on, that his voice made no sound in their ears, he sometimes came out with his guess quite loud. The ghost was greatly pleased to find him in this mood, and looked upon him with such favour that he begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the guest departed. But this, the spirit said, could not be done.
Here is a new game. 1 half-hour, Spirit, only one.
It was a game called Yes and No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what. He only answering their questions yes or no.
Oh, Fred, I found it out. I know what it is, Fred. I know what it is.
What is it?
It's your Uncle Scrooge.
He has given us plenty of merriment, I'm sure, and it would be ungrateful not to drink his health. Here is a glass of mulled wine ready to our hand at the moment, and I say, Uncle Scrooge,
Well, Uncle Scrooge.
a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is. He wouldn't take it from me, but he may have it. Nevertheless, Uncle Scrooge.
It was a long night, if it were only a night. But Scrooge had his doubts of this because the Christmas holidays appeared to be condensed into the space of time they passed together. It was strange, too, that while Scrooge remained unaltered in his outward form, the ghost grew older, clearly older. Scrooge had observed this change but never spoke of it until they left a children's Twelfth Night party, when looking at the spirit as they stood together in an open place, he noticed that its hair was grey.
Are spirits' lives so short?
My life upon this globe is very brief. It ends tonight.
Tonight?
Tonight at midnight. Hark, the time is drawing near.
Forgive me if I am not justified in what I ask, but I see something strange and not belonging to yourself protruding from your skirts.
This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. Beware them both and all of their degree, but most of all, beware this boy. For on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. Deny it. Slander those who tell it ye. Admit it for your factious purposes and make it worse, and bide the end.
Have they no refuge or resources?
Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?
The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it not. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which the spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand.
I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
The spirit gave no answer, but pointed onward with his hand.
You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us. Is that so, Spirit? Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me? Lead on, lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, Spirit.
The phantom moved away. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them and encompass them of its own act. There they were, in the heart of it, on the exchange, amongst the merchants who hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointed at them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk.
No, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
Why, what was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die.
Oh, God knows.
Wonder what he's done with his money.
Haven't heard. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me. That's all I know. It's likely to be a cheap funeral, for upon my life, I don't know anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer?
I don't mind going if a lunch is provided, but I must be fed if I make one.
Well, I'm the most disinterested among you. After all, for I never wear black gloves, I never eat lunch, but I'll offer to go, if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye-bye.
The phantom glided on into a street. The finger pointed to two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking that the explanation might lie there. He knew these men also perfectly. They were men of business, very wealthy, and of great importance.
How are you?
How are you?
Well, old Scratch has got his own at last, eh?
So I'm told. Cold, isn't it?
Seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose.
No, something else to think of. Good morning.
They left the busy scene and went into an obscure part of the town where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly. Far in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed, beetling shop below a penthouse roof, where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. Upon the floor within, there were piled up heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, files, scales, weights, and refuse iron of all kinds. Sitting in among the wares was a grey-haired rascal nearly 70 years of age. Scrooge and the phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop, closely followed by another woman and a man in faded black.
Let the charwoman alone to be the first, let the laundress alone to be the second, and let the undertaker's man alone to be the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance. If we haven't all three met here without meaning it.
You couldn't have met in a better place. Come into the parlour. You made free of it long ago, you know, and the other two ain't strangers. Stop till I shut the door of the shop. Ah, how it shrieks. There ain't a rusty bit of metal in the place as its own hinges. I believe, and I'm sure, there's no such old bones here as mine. We're all suitable for our calling. We're all well matched. Come into the parlour, come into the parlour.
What odds then? What odds, Mrs. Dibbler? Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did.
That's true, indeed. No man more so.
Why then, don't stand staring as if you was all afraid, woman. Who's the wiser? We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose.
No, indeed, we should hope not.
Hope not.
Very well then, that's enough. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose.
No, indeed.
If he wanted to keep them after he was dead, a wicked old screw, why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had somebody to look after him when he was stuck with death, instead of lying gasping out his last there alone by himself.
It's the truest word that ever was spoke. It's a judgment on him.
I wish it was a little heavier judgment, and it should have been. You may depend upon it. If I could have laid my hands on anything else. Open that bundle, old Joe. Now let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid for them to see it. We know pretty well that we were helping ourselves before we met here. I believe it's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe.
That's your account, and I wouldn't give another sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next?
The second woman, Mrs. Dilber the laundress, was next. Sheets and towels and a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tons, and a few boots. Her account was chalked on the wall by old Joe in the same manner.
I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and that's why I ruin myself. That's your account. If you asked me for another penny and made it an open question, I'd repent to being so liberal and knock off half a crown.
And now, undo my bundle, Joe.
What do you call this? Bed curtains?
Bed curtains.
You don't mean to say you took him down, rings and all, with him lying there?
Yes, I do. Why not?
You were born to make a fortune, and you'll certainly do it.
I certainly shan't hold my hand when I can get anything in it by reaching it out, for the sake of such a man as he was, I promise you, Joe. Now, don't drop that oil upon the blankets now.
His blankets?
Whose else do you think? He isn't likely to take cold without him, I dare say.
I hope he didn't die of anything catching it.
Don't you be afraid of that. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about for him for such things if he did. Ha ha. You may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had. It's the best he had, and a fine one too. They'd have wasted it if it hasn't been for me.
What do you call wasting of it?
Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it isn't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming to the body. He can't look uglier than he did in that one. This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead.
Spirit, I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this?
He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay something covered up, which, though it was dumb, announced itself in awful language. Scrooge glanced towards the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger upon Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought of it, felt how easy it would be to do, and longed to do it, but he had no more power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the spectre at his side.
Spirit, this is a fearful place. I'm leaving it. I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me. Let us go.
Still, the ghost pointed with an unmoved finger to the head.
I understand you, and I would do it if I could, but I have not the power, Spirit. I have not the power. If there is any person in the town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, show that person to me, Spirit. I beseech you.
The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment, like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed a room by daylight where a mother and her children were. She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound. At length, the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed, though he was young. There was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight, of which he felt ashamed and which
Is
he
it good?
felt puzzled to regret.
Is it good or bad?
Bad.
We are quite ruined.
No, there's hope yet, Caroline.
If he relents, there is. Nothing is past hope if such a miracle has happened.
He is past relenting. He's dead. When the half-drunken woman whom I told you of last night said to me when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, and what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying then.
To whom will our debt be transferred?
I don't know, Caroline, but before that time we shall be ready with the money, and even though we were not, it would be a bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor and a successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline.
Let me see some tenderness connected with the death, or that dark chamber, Spirit, that we left just now, will be forever present to me.
The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and the children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in singing, but surely they were very quiet. They took a child and set him in the midst of them. Where had Scrooge heard those words? He had not dreamed them.
Oh, the colour hurts my eyes. They're better now again. It makes them weak by candlelight. And I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time. Past it, rather, but I think he was walked a little slower than he used to since these last few evenings, Mother. Oh, I have known him walk. I have known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed, and so have I often. And so have I. But he was very light to carry out, and his father loved him so, and it was no trouble. And there's your father at the door.
He hurried out to meet him, and little Bob in his long scarf, had need of it, poor fellow, came in. His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him to it the most. Then the two young Cratchits got upon his knees and laid each child a little cheek against his face, as if they said, "Don't mind it, Father, don't be grieved." Bob was very cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the work upon the table and praised the industry and speed of Mrs. Cratchit and the girls.
Your work will be done long before Sunday, I think.
Sunday, you went today then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is, but you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little child.
Oh, now don't be upsetting yourself, Father.
Indeed, my dear. Do you know, I met young Fred, Mr. Scrooge's nephew, today, and he was most extraordinarily kind. He saw that I was a little down and inquired what had happened to distress me, on which, for he is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you ever heard, I told him. I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, he said, and heartily sorry for your good wife. By the by, how did he ever know that? I don't know.
You what, my dear?
Why, that you were a good wife.
Everybody knows that, Mum.
Very well observed, my boy. I hope they do. Heartily sorry, he said, for your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way, he said, giving me his card, that's where I live. Pray, come to me. Now, it wasn't for the sake of anything he might be able to do for us. so much as for his kind way that was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he'd known our Tiny Tim and felt with us.
Oh, I'm sure he's such a good soul.
You would be sure of it, my dear, if you saw and spoke to him. I shouldn't be at all surprised, mark what I say, if he got Peter a better situation.
Oh, only hear that, Peter.
And then Peter will be keeping company with someone and setting up for himself.
Get along with you.
It's just as likely as not, one of these days, though there's plenty of time for that, my dear. But however, and whenever we part from one another, I am sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that was among us.
Never, Father.
And I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it.
Never, Father.
I am happy. I'm very happy.
Mrs. Cratchit kissed him, his daughters kissed him, the two young Cratchits kissed him, and Peter himself shook hands. Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God.
Spectre, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me what man that was whom we saw lying dead.
The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him, as before, into the resorts of businessmen, but showed him not himself.
This court through which we hurry now is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come. The house is yonder. Why do you point away?
The spirit led him on until they reached an iron gate to a churchyard. Here, then, the wretched man whose name he had now to learn lay underneath the ground. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one.
Before I draw near to that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they shadows of things that may be only?
Still, the ghost pointed downwards to the grave by which it stood.
Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if persevered in, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me.
Scrooge crept towards the stone, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge.
Am I that man who lay upon the bed? No, Spirit. Oh, no, no. Spirit, hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Good Spirit, your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. I will honour Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone.
Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in.
I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. O Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, old Jacob, on my knees. They are not torn down, they are not torn down, rings and all. They are here, I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be, I know they will. I don't know what to do. I am as light as a feather, I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. I am as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. Hello, here, whoop, hello. There's the saucepan that the gruel was in. There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. There's a window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right, it's all true. It all happened. Ha ha ha! I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I have been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind, I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello, whip, hello, here.
Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring, cold. Cold, piping for the blood to dance to. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet, fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious.
What's today?
Eh?
What's today, my fine fellow?
Today? Why, it's Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow.
Hello.
Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one at the corner?
I should hope I did.
An intelligent boy, a remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one.
What? The one as big as me?
What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck.
Well, it's hanging there now.
Is it? Go and buy it.
Get away with you.
No, I am in earnest. Go and buy it, and tell him to bring it here, that I may give them the direction where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Joe Miller never made such a joke as sending it to Bob's will be.
The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did somehow, and went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there, waiting his arrival, the knocker caught his eye.
I shall love it as long as I live. I scarcely ever looked at it before. What an honest expression it has in its face. It's a wonderful knocker. Here's the turkey. Hello, whip, how are you? Merry Christmas. Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. You must have a cab.
He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present. And walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded everyone with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humoured fellows said, "Good morning, sir. A Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, those were the blithest in his ears. He had not gone far when, coming on towards him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting house the day before, and said, "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe." It sent a pang across his heart to think how this old gentleman would look upon him when they met. But he knew what path lay straight before him, and he took it.
My dear sir, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir.
Mr. Scrooge?
Yes, that is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and you will have the goodness.
Scrooge whispered in his ear. Lord bless me, Mr. Scrooge. Are you serious?
If you please, not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favour?
My dear sir, I don't know what to say to such men.
Don't say anything, please. Come and see me. Will you come and see me?
I will.
Thank ye. I'm much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you.
In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock. But he made a dash and did it.
Is your master at home, my dear?
Yes, sir.
Where is he, my love?
He's in the dining room, sir, along with mistress. I'll show you upstairs, if you please.
Thank ye. He knows me. I'll go in myself, my dear. Fred?
Bless my soul, who's that?
It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
Let him in? It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same. So did Topper when he came. So did the plump sister when she came. So did everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. But he was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be the first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did it. Yes, he did it. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come in. His hat was off before he opened the door, his scarf too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
Hello. What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I am very sorry, sir. I am behind my time.
You are? Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please.
It's only once a year, sir. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
Now, I'll tell you what, my friend, I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. And therefore, I am about to raise your salary. A Merry Christmas, Bob. A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavour to assist your struggling family. And we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop, Bob. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins as have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, every one.
Here, here. Wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Very good.